soft winter dusk settled over Madison as Emily Harmon stood beside the tall window in her apartment overlooking Lake Monona. The lights scattered across the snow-covered city looked peaceful from 20 floors up, yet inside her chest was a storm that refused to quiet. She held her phone loosely in her hand, watching another email notification flash across the screen. The investors had written again, eager for updates, demanding progress that she did not have. For a long moment, she simply stared at the glowing screen and wondered how close she was to losing everything she had built. Emily had spent nearly 10 years pouring her heart into her small fashion company tucked along State Street. It had grown through seasons of hope and struggle, yet now stood on the edge of falling apart. Every decision seemed tied to the future of the 200 employees who trusted her leadership. Every night ended with the same hollow feeling that she was trying to catch a ship already sinking. The pressure never left her shoulders, and the loneliness that settled in its shadows felt heavier with each passing day. The thought of sitting through a blind date tonight seemed impossible. She could almost feel the silence at the small table, the polite exchange of questions, the predictable talk about hobbies and work, all while her mind drifted back to contracts, deadlines, and the fear of losing the company she had poured her youth into. Her friend Karen had insisted she go, saying she needed one evening to remember she was more than her stress. Yet Emily barely felt like herself anymore. She set her phone on the counter, rubbing her temples as the weight of unread messages pressed against her thoughts. The winter air outside carried a sense of stillness that she longed for. All she wanted was a moment of peace, something gentle to hold on to. The idea of pretending to be cheerful for a stranger felt like lifting a stone with trembling hands. Her dress hung perfectly on her frame, simple yet elegant, something she had chosen to show confidence, even though she felt none. A familiar knock sounded at her door, though her friend never bothered to wait for permission. Karen stepped inside with her usual energy, cheeks flushed from the cold and eyes bright with determination. She took one look at Emily and shook her head the way an older sister might do when she saw a younger sibling ready to make the wrong choice. Emily tried to force a weak smile, but Karen saw straight through it. Emily confessed the truth in a soft, tired voice. She felt worn down by the burden of keeping her company alive. She felt stretched thin, as though every day stole a little more strength from her. The moment she said the words, it was as if the air in the room shifted, making her realize how long she had carried that fear alone. Karen placed a steady hand on her arm, urging her to breathe, reminding her that she was still human, still entitled to one evening where she could let the world rest outside the door. The room felt warm with the scent of pine from the small Christmas arrangement sitting on the counter. Outside the glass window, gentle flakes of snow drifted down like tiny blessings from the quiet night sky. Yet even with the beauty surrounding her, Emily felt a sense of dread. She did not want to disappoint Karen, who had stood by her through so many storms. She also did not want to face a stranger with her heart feeling so unsettled. For a moment, she considered sending a message to cancel the date. She imagined saying she had come down with a sudden illness, something mild yet believable. But she knew Karen would not accept that excuse. Her friend had arranged this blind date with the hope that Emily might find one small spark of joy, a brief reminder that life held more than spreadsheets and deadlines. And though Emily doubted anything meaningful would happen tonight, she knew she had to at least try for the sake of her own weary soul. She took a long breath, steadying herself as she reached for her coat. The wool fabric felt reassuring beneath her fingers, like a promise of warmth in the brisk December night. Karen smiled, proud that Emily had chosen courage over fear, even if only for one evening. Emily stepped toward the door, telling herself that she could manage a single conversation. After all, one quiet night could not hurt, and perhaps it might even bring a moment of rest to a heart that had forgotten how to breathe freely. Karen stayed in the doorway, her arms folded, yet her expression full of the kind of affection only true friends carry through the years. The soft glow of the apartment lights reflected in her eyes as she studied Emily with a mixture of concern and protectiveness. She knew her friend better than anyone understood the long nights, the heavy decisions, the way responsibility had crept into every inch of Emily's life, until she had little space left for her own heart. Emily tried to fix her hair in the hallway mirror, though her hands trembled slightly. She whispered that she did not feel ready, that her mind was still tangled with the worry of the upcoming deadline, the pressure of saving the company before mid-January. Karen stepped closer, gently taking the brush from Emily's hand and finishing the last few strokes for her. It was a small gesture, but it carried years of friendship in its quiet tenderness. "You have given your life to that company," Karen said in a steady voice marked with warmth. "But you have not given anything to yourself. Not in a long time." She rested the brush on the counter and looked directly into Emily's eyes. "You deserve an evening where you are simply a woman enjoying a winter night, not a business owner trying to hold everything together." Emily let out a slow breath as though releasing a burden she had held alone for too long. The faint hum of the apartment heating system filled the silence, and the soft scent of cinnamon from a candle on the shelf lingered in the air. Outside the window, the snow thickened, covering the city in a blanket of white that softened every sharp edge. Karen placed both hands on Emily's shoulders and gave them a comforting squeeze. "You have been carrying more than any one person should have to bear," Karen continued, her voice low and sincere. "Emily, I have watched you push through every setback, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. But you cannot fight every battle alone. Sometimes you need a pause. Just one evening to let your heart remember what joy feels like." Emily felt her throat tighten at the truth in her friend's words. She had forgotten the simple comfort of a leisurely dinner, a warm conversation, or the gentle laughter that came when life slowed down long enough to feel human again. Instead, she had spent the past 2 years chasing deadlines and running from the fear of failure, losing touch with the world outside her office. Karen stepped back and reached for Emily's coat, holding it open for her. The gesture felt almost parental, filled with quiet care. "Come on," she said softly. "Tonight is not about love. It is not even about liking this man. It is about giving yourself permission to breathe, to sit in a cozy place with warm lights and kind voices, to feel that you are still part of a world that offers comfort even when everything seems uncertain." Emily slipped into the coat, the weight of the fabric settling around her like a reminder that she was still strong, still standing. She managed a small smile, touched by the kindness in her friend's voice. Karen picked up Emily's gloves from the table and placed them gently in her hands, as if handing over a piece of courage. A quiet moment passed between them, warm with shared history. Emily felt something soften inside her, a fragile spark of hope she had not felt in a long while. Maybe the night would not be so heavy. Maybe it could bring a moment of peace, a reminder that she was still more than her fears. She picked up her keys and opened the door, ready to face the winter evening. Karen watched her go with the proud gaze of someone who believed in her completely. And as Emily stepped into the hallway, she felt for the first time that night that she might find something good waiting out there, even if she did not yet know what form it would take. The December evening deepened as Emily drove along the quiet stretch that curved past the edge of Lake Monona. The road shimmered beneath a new layer of snow, and the soft white flakes floating down caught the reflection of passing streetlights, giving the night a hushed and peaceful look. Inside the car, however, Emily felt none of that calm. Her thoughts churned, tangled with deadlines, and the meeting planned for mid-January, each worry pressing against the other until her chest tightened. She tried to steady her breath while the heater hummed faintly, giving off a warm breeze that contrasted with the frost settling on the windows. She told herself to keep going, that she only had a short drive left before reaching Maple Street Café. The evening might still bring a small break from the weight she had been carrying alone. But then a strange rattle broke through the quiet. It was faint at first, then sharper, followed by a grinding sound that did not belong in any healthy engine. Emily's heart dropped as the dashboard lights flickered. The steering wheel shuddered beneath her hands. She whispered a plea for the car to hold on just a few more minutes. The engine gave one final groan before falling silent. The car coasted a few feet, then stopped completely on the side of the dimly lit road. The sudden stillness felt like a cold hand gripping her shoulder. She tried turning the key once more, but nothing happened. Only the soft whisper of the wind outside answered her. Emily leaned back in the seat, fighting the urge to close her eyes and let exhaustion swallow her whole. The night felt heavier now, filled with a quiet ache of disappointment. She looked at the clock on the dashboard. It showed 7:07. She was already running late, and now this. A soft cloud of fog gathered on the windshield as she exhaled, feeling her resolve weaken. She reached for her phone and called roadside assistance. The automated voice informed her that several calls were already ahead of her and that the wait would be long. 2 hours. On Christmas week, she should have expected delays, yet hearing the number made her shoulders slump. She sent a quick message to Karen telling her this must be a sign to go home. The reply came back almost instantly, a firm, short message that told her to find a ride and not abandon the evening. Emily rested the phone in her lap and stared out toward the snowy road. The snowflakes drifting past her headlights looked like falling stars caught in silence. For a moment, she wondered if fate was nudging her away from this night. Maybe she was pushing too hard. Maybe she was not meant to meet anyone tonight. The thought soothed her for an instant, offering an easy escape. She reached for the rideshare app, but the signal flickered, struggling in the winter air. As she waited for it to load, she sensed the quiet around her growing deeper. It was the kind of stillness that made the world seem larger than her troubles, yet it also made her feel strangely small and alone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tried again, hoping the app would open. The distant glow of headlights appeared behind her, cutting through the soft shadows. Her breath caught. A truck approached slowly, its tires crunching over the snow-covered pavement. The vehicle rolled to a gentle stop behind her car. The lights cast long shapes across the ground, and Emily felt a ripple of unease mixed with relief. This part of the city was calm at night, yet an isolated road always carried its own uncertainty. She watched as the driver stepped out, moving carefully through the snow. He kept his hands visible, his posture open and calm, as if trying to show he meant no harm. The cold air swirled around him, carrying the scent of winter and engine oil. In that quiet moment, Emily felt a shift in the night. What began as another burden in a long series of setbacks was slowly shaping into something else, something she could not yet name. The stranger took a few steps closer, his voice steady and gentle as he asked if she was all right. And without knowing it, Emily was standing at the edge of a turning point, unaware of how completely this moment would change the course of her life. The cold night air clung to the quiet stretch of road as Daniel approached the stalled vehicle. His boots pressed softly into the snow, leaving clear footprints behind him. The breath escaping his lips turned to pale mist in the moonlit glow. He paused a respectful distance from the driver's window, offering a calm smile that reached his eyes. His voice carried a gentle warmth as he asked if she was safe and whether her car had given out. Emily rolled the window down, slightly comforted by the sincerity in his tone. The stranger had a face shaped by honest work and unhurried kindness. His presence eased the worry crowding her thoughts. She explained the odd noise the car had made, the flickering lights, and the sudden halt. Daniel nodded with quiet understanding and asked if he might take a look under the hood. She stepped out into the cold and wrapped her coat tighter around herself. Snowflakes drifted down in steady silence, settling on her hair like fine crystals. Daniel lifted the hood and leaned in, drawing out a small flashlight from his keychain. The soft beam glowed against metal surfaces while he inspected each part with a practiced eye. His movements were steady, showing years of experience and a natural patience that felt comforting to watch. After a few moments, he straightened up with a thoughtful look. He explained in simple words that her alternator was nearly worn out, but he could patch it for the night. With a few careful adjustments and a steady hand, he tightened a loose connection and ensured the engine would last the short drive to her destination. His focus never wavered, the kind that came from a lifetime of solving problems for neighbors, travelers, and anyone who crossed his path. Emily watched him work, noting the gentle way he handled each tool. She felt strangely at ease, something she had not felt in weeks. When he closed the hood, he gave her a reassuring smile. "The car should run long enough to get you where you are headed," he said softly. "Just be sure to have it repaired properly soon." She thanked him with genuine gratitude, offering to pay for his time. Daniel shook his head firmly, saying he did not charge for helping strangers in the snow. His father had taught him long ago that a person's worth was measured by the kindness they carried, not the coins in their pocket. Those words lingered in the air, warmed by the sincerity behind them. As the wind brushed past their faces, the two stood in the quiet night, speaking with an ease that surprised them both. They talked about the weather, the holiday season, and the small joys of winter nights. Daniel mentioned he had a young daughter waiting at home, full of excitement for Christmas morning. Emily shared that she was headed to a small café downtown, though she admitted she was not entirely sure she wanted to be there. Their conversation felt natural, as though they had known each other far longer than a handful of minutes. There were no guarded tones, no forced smiles. Only two souls crossing paths on a snowy road, sharing a brief moment of human warmth. When Daniel stepped back and wished her a peaceful evening, Emily found herself wishing the moment would linger just a bit more. She started the car and listened with relief as the engine hummed to life again. She thanked him once more, her voice soft but heartfelt. Daniel returned to his truck and pulled out slowly, leading the way down the snowy road. Emily followed behind, watching his taillights guide her toward the unfamiliar night ahead. A gentle warmth settled in her chest, a quiet feeling that whispered something meaningful had begun, though neither of them yet understood its shape. Emily followed the steady glow of Daniel's taillights through the gentle snowfall. The road wound toward the heart of Madison, where Maple Street Café sat, tucked between two older brick shops, its windows glowing with warm amber light. The snow gathered softly along the sidewalks, giving the quiet street a peaceful charm that felt almost inviting. Emily parked her car just as Daniel pulled into the space beside her. She stepped out, brushing the light snow from her coat, feeling a strange flutter inside her chest. Daniel waited near the entrance with the door partly open, holding it for her with a courteous nod. She thanked him and stepped into the cozy warmth of the café. The scent of roasted beans and cinnamon filled the room, weaving comfort through the air. String lights framed the wooden beams overhead, while voices from nearby tables mingled in gentle murmurs. It felt like a place where winter softened and worries loosened their grip. Judith Miller, the owner who had run the café for nearly 3 decades, looked up from behind the counter. She greeted the new arrivals with a smile that carried the ease of countless holiday evenings. When Daniel raised his hand to greet her, she waved back warmly. "You are right on time," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Your date just arrived." She glanced toward Emily, then back to Daniel, and the realization settled upon both at once. Judith spoke again with cheerful certainty. "And you must be Emily Harmon." The name hit the air like a quiet spark. Emily turned toward Daniel, surprise widening her eyes. He looked equally stunned, his expression shifting between disbelief and a slow rising smile. For a brief moment, they simply stared, caught between amusement and wonder. She felt her breath hitch slightly as the unexpected truth unfolded before them. "You are Daniel," she whispered, her voice soft and astonished. "And you are Emily," he replied gently, almost in a daze. The next moment brought laughter, warm and genuine, breaking through the surprise between them. They stood there, two souls who had already shared a moment of kindness on the roadside, now discovering they were meant to meet again under entirely different circumstances. Judith stepped aside with a knowing grin, pointing toward a corner table where 2 menus waited. As they walked to the booth, Emily felt a lift inside her chest, as though some hidden weight had shifted. She slid into the seat across from Daniel, their smiles still lingering. For a moment, neither spoke, letting the quiet hum of the café fill the space. Snow tapped softly against the window beside them, adding a peaceful rhythm to the night. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, still trying to gather his thoughts. "I cannot believe we just spent 20 minutes talking on the side of the road without realizing this," he said, with a gentle laugh. "I know," Emily replied, shaking her head slowly. "I kept thinking how strange it was to meet someone who felt so easy to talk to. If I had known, I might not have been quite so nervous." "Well," he said with a modest smile, "at least we have already broken the awkward part of the evening." Emily laughed quietly, the sound easing the last of her tension. Their unexpected reunion felt like a soft beginning, one shaped by chance, and guided by something deeper than either of them could name. The warmth of the café wrapped around them, welcoming their story with gentle hands. When Judith arrived at the table with 2 steaming cups of coffee, they both said thank you at the same moment. Their voices blended and brought another laugh between them. As the snow deepened outside, the night settled into a quiet magic, drawing them gently into one another's company. And so what had begun as a weary evening for both slowly turned into a moment neither could forget, a moment where kindness on a snowy road guided 2 lonely hearts toward the warmth of shared possibility. The warmth inside Maple Street Café wrapped itself around Emily and Daniel as they settled into their seats. Judith had placed a small candle in the center of the table, its gentle flame flickering softly with each draft of warm air drifting from the kitchen. Outside, snow continued to fall, layering the sidewalks with a white softness that made the night feel sheltered from the noise of the world. For a few quiet seconds, they simply sat there, letting the surprise of their unexpected meeting settle. Then Daniel lifted his coffee, taking a slow sip before meeting her eyes with a smile that carried sincerity rather than pretense. Emily felt that small gesture loosen something inside her, as if the weight she had carried all week had shifted enough for her to take a deeper breath. At first, the conversation touched on simple things. They spoke about the snowstorm moving across Wisconsin, the little traditions that had colored each of their childhood holidays, and how winter always brought its own kind of stillness to Madison. Daniel talked about the garage that had been in his family for years, a place built with the hands of his father and grandfather, a place he felt tied to in ways that ran deeper than work. Emily listened, drawn in by the warmth in his voice when he spoke about legacy and gratitude. Then the conversation began to stretch into richer places, the kind that grew not from effort, but from comfort. Daniel told a story about an old pickup truck a customer had brought in with a frozen lock after leaving it outside for days. He explained how he had warmed the key with his breath and coaxed the stubborn lock open, earning a grateful smile from a man who had been certain the truck was finished. Emily laughed softly at the gentle humor in the tale, her shoulders easing even more with each passing minute. When Emily shared stories from her work, Daniel listened closely. She talked about the long hours spent designing pieces for clients, the late nights sketching patterns under warm lamplight, and the quiet joy she felt when someone found confidence in clothing she had created. Daniel nodded with understanding, recognizing the pride that came from building something through years of dedication. The minutes slipped away like grains of warm sand between their fingers. Judith made her rounds through the café, refilling mugs and offering smiles, but she lingered near their table just long enough to see the glow on their faces. Their laughter rose softly among the hum of other conversations, blending gently with the carols playing low from the speakers. Emily noticed how Daniel carried a calm strength within him, the kind formed through hardship and resilience. He spoke about Chloe with a father's tender pride, describing her bright imagination and the small drawings she made every evening at their kitchen table. Emily felt her heart warm at the devotion he held for his daughter. It revealed a gentleness she seldom found in the fast-moving world she occupied. Daniel saw in Emily a quiet courage she rarely acknowledged. As she spoke about her company and the dreams she had woven into its creation, he sensed the depth of her dedication. She described the challenges she faced with an honesty that carried both vulnerability and resolve. He admired that strength, recognizing it as something rare. 2 hours passed without either of them noticing. The snow outside grew heavier, painting the café windows with shifting white patterns. Inside, their conversation continued like an easy melody flowing through the room. With every story shared and every moment of quiet understanding, something small yet meaningful took shape. When Emily finally glanced at the clock above the counter, her eyes widened slightly. She had not checked her phone once. She had not thought about deadlines or messages or looming decisions. For the first time in a long while, she had simply been present, listening, laughing, and sharing a warm evening with someone who felt steady in a world that so often pulled her in every direction. The candle in the center of the table flickered softly as if nodding in approval. The night had unfolded in a way neither had expected, carrying two weary hearts into a gentle place of connection. What began as an obligation had changed into something tender, something neither of them could quite name yet, but both quietly felt. As the candle on the table burned lower, the warm glow settled gently across Emily's face. Daniel noticed a quiet shift in her expression, something softer yet weighed down by thoughts she had kept tucked away. The earlier laughter faded into a calm stillness. She held her mug with both hands, staring into the dark swirl of coffee, as though it might offer a direction she could not find on her own. Daniel sensed her retreating into a place she rarely revealed to others. He leaned forward just slightly, offering a steady presence without a single word of pressure. That simple patience felt like an open door. Emily drew a slow breath, her shoulders rising and falling before she finally spoke. "I have been carrying a fear I cannot shake," she whispered, her voice low enough that it seemed meant only for him. "The company I built is close to failing. Every day feels like trying to hold back a tide with my bare hands. And if I lose it, the 200 people who depend on me will lose their jobs too. I think about them more than I think about myself." Her voice trembled on the last words before she steadied herself again. The candlelight flickered across her eyes, revealing the depth of exhaustion she had hidden beneath a composed exterior. She had built a life around keeping everything together, yet now she felt as though her world rested on crumbling ground. Daniel listened with the full weight of his attention. He did not interrupt or offer quick answers. Instead, he placed his palms on the table in a quiet sign of presence. When she finished speaking, he waited a moment, letting the silence settle gently around them like fresh snow on the ground. "Emily," he said softly, "you have carried more than most could bear. And you have done it with courage that few ever recognize in themselves. Sometimes strength is not about winning every battle. Sometimes it is about rising each day even when the weight tries to pull you down." His voice was warm, touched with sincerity that came from lived hardship rather than practiced comfort. Daniel continued, choosing each word with care. "My father used to say that endurance grows from the heart, not from the head. You care about your people. That alone shows what kind of leader you are. And whatever comes next, you will face it with the same determination that brought you here tonight." Emily lifted her eyes, slowly meeting his steady gaze. The kindness she saw there caused her breath to catch. Most people in her life offered solutions, strategies, or reminders of what was at stake. But Daniel offered something far rarer. He offered understanding without expectation or judgment. It felt like stepping out of a storm into a warm room. "I do not know how to fix everything," she admitted quietly. "Some days it feels like the ground is slipping away beneath me and I am tired of pretending I am fine." "You do not have to pretend with me," he replied in a voice as gentle as snowfall. "Everyone needs a place to rest. Even the strongest hearts deserve a moment of peace." Emily felt a slow warmth fill the spaces inside her that had been cold for months. His words reached her in a place she had long forgotten to tend. Her eyes stung slightly, but she blinked the feeling away, not wanting to break the fragile peace between them. "You make things feel lighter," she said, almost surprised by her own confession. Daniel smiled, the kind that rose from gratitude rather than pride. "Sometimes," he said softly, "all any of us need is for someone to sit with us through the heavy moments." The candle flame wavered gently as a draft moved through the room. Outside, snow gathered on the windowsill, muting the distant sounds of the city. Inside the café, two weary hearts found a small corner of comfort in each other. The world beyond the windows could wait for a little while longer. The café had grown quieter as the evening settled further into night. A few regulars lingered over warm drinks, but most had already stepped back into the snow-filled streets. Only the soft murmur of distant voices and the gentle clatter of cups blended with the carols drifting through the speakers. In that peaceful corner booth, Emily felt her own thoughts opening in ways she had not allowed for a long time. She took a slow sip of coffee, then set the cup down carefully. Her hands remained wrapped around its warmth as she gathered the courage to continue. Daniel watched her with a patient calm, offering his presence rather than pressure. It was that quiet steadiness that gave her the strength to speak the rest of what weighed on her. "There is a deadline coming," she began softly. "January 15th. If I cannot secure the new location by then, the investors will pull every remaining dollar out of the company. We have worked so hard for so many years, yet it feels like everything is hanging by a thread. The pressure is constant, like carrying a stone that grows heavier each morning." Her breath faltered, but she found her voice again. "I have spent nights at the office reviewing contracts and projections, trying to see a way through. I look at those numbers until my eyes blur, yet the answer never feels clear. And every time I think about the people who depend on me, I feel that stone pressing deeper." Daniel listened closely, his expression gentle but serious. He could hear the exhaustion tucked behind each word, the kind that came from months of fighting for something she built with her heart. He leaned forward slightly, offering her a steady gaze that held both empathy and quiet admiration. Emily continued speaking carefully, as though she feared her voice might break if she moved too fast. "The company has always been more than a business to me. It is a dream that carried me through the early years when I had nothing but determination. We started with a tiny office above a bookstore, sewing late into the night while drinking cheap coffee. Those memories still feel warm, but now the work feels different. Heavier, as if I must save something slipping away faster than I can catch it." She paused and looked toward the window where snowflakes clung to the glass in delicate icy shapes. The world outside felt peaceful in contrast to the turmoil inside her chest. Her voice softened once more. "And what frightens me most is the thought of failing people who trusted me. It keeps me awake long after midnight. I feel as if the future is closing in from every side." Daniel placed his hands gently on the table. He did not reach for her yet. The warmth in his presence felt like a steady hand resting near her own. "Emily," he said in a quiet tone, "you have carried this burden bravely. Most would have collapsed under half of what you bear. You speak about fear, but I hear dedication. You speak about pressure, but I see strength. Not the loud kind that shouts, but the steady kind that rises again and again." His voice held a calm certainty that drew her in. "You have not come this far by accident. You built something with care and courage, piece by piece. Hard seasons do not erase that. They only show how deeply you care. And that caring is what will guide you forward." A faint warmth spread through Emily like gentle light touching a shadowed room. She felt seen not as a CEO struggling against the tide, but as a woman who had poured her heart into a dream. Daniel offered a comfort she had not expected to find tonight, the kind that arose, not from solutions, but from understanding. Emily looked at him with grateful eyes. Hearing him speak with such certainty eased something inside her. It felt like a small doorway opening within her heart, letting in a breath of hope she had not felt in weeks. Outside, the snow thickened softly, as if wrapping the night in a blanket meant to protect weary spirits. For the first time in a long while, she felt she did not have to carry everything alone. The following afternoon arrived with a softer sky, the kind that carried a faint hint of sunshine beneath drifting clouds. Emily stood at the foot of the narrow staircase leading to the small apartment above the repair shop. She held a simple tote filled with art supplies she had picked up earlier. Her heart beat with a mixture of nervousness and quiet anticipation. This place felt far removed from the polished world she usually inhabited, yet something about it called to her with a sense of gentle familiarity. She climbed the steps slowly, each footfall echoing in the stillness. When she reached the top, she hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door. Almost immediately, she heard quick footsteps inside, followed by a burst of cheerful energy. The door swung open, and there stood Chloe in soft winter leggings and a sweater decorated with tiny embroidered stars. Her wide smile lit up the space as if the sun itself had stepped inside. "Daddy," she called excitedly, "she is here." Daniel appeared behind his daughter, his face warm, with a quiet joy he tried to steady. He welcomed Emily with a smile that carried gratitude and a trace of shyness. She stepped inside, taking in the cozy surroundings. The apartment was small yet full of life. A small tree stood in the corner, decorated with handmade ornaments and twinkling lights. A garland of paper snowflakes hung across the window, fluttering softly with each breath of warm air from the heater. Chloe reached for Emily's hand with an eagerness that touched her heart. She tugged her toward a corner where a shoebox brimming with colored drawings rested atop a small wooden table. Emily knelt beside the child, gently picking up one picture after another. Each drawing revealed a little world shaped by imagination, color, and a tender eye for detail. There were gowns made from swirling lines, tiny winter coats with sparkles, and simple outfits inspired by the clothes worn by people Chloe admired. "These are beautiful," Emily said softly, her voice carrying genuine admiration. "You see shapes and details most grown-ups forget to notice." Chloe beamed her missing front tooth, giving her smile an endearing charm. "Do you really think so?" she asked with hope shining in her eyes. Emily nodded and opened her tote. "I brought something for us to try together." She pulled out soft fabric scraps, colored pencils, and a few sheets of textured paper. Chloe gasped, with the pure delight only a child could express. The two settled on the floor, draping fabric over a small chair to create different shapes. Chloe studied the flowing lines with fascination, asking questions in a lively stream that filled the room with warmth. Daniel watched from the kitchen doorway, holding a pair of steaming mugs. He leaned against the frame, his gaze tender as he absorbed the scene before him. Emily sat there on the carpeted floor, her careful hands guiding Chloe through simple techniques that brought joy to the young girl. Her laughter blended with Chloe's bright voice, weaving a gentle melody that warmed the small space. When Daniel stepped forward with hot chocolate for the two of them, Emily looked up with a grateful smile. Her hair had fallen loosely over her shoulders, softening her features. She accepted the mug, its warmth spreading through her fingers. "This is lovely," she said quietly, her eyes drifting from the child sitting beside her to the man who had welcomed her into this gentle world. Chloe continued her creative exploration with a radiant enthusiasm. She designed a layered gown using a piece of light cotton, proudly showing Emily each fold she created. The child's joy was contagious, lifting the heaviness that had settled over Emily's heart for weeks. She felt a tenderness she had long forgotten, stirred by the innocence of the moment and the comfort of simple togetherness. In that small room above a modest garage, surrounded by holiday decorations and the soft hum of everyday life, Emily felt a fragile yet growing warmth. It was the warmth of belonging, the warmth of a place where expectations faded and only sincerity remained. And for the first time in many months, her weary heart dared to open just a little more. The warm afternoon drifted on as Emily and Chloe continued shaping small designs from fabric scraps. The little girl's laughter filled the cozy apartment like gentle bells echoing through a winter meadow. Daniel had stepped downstairs to fetch a tool from the garage, leaving Emily and Chloe surrounded by drawings, pencils, and soft cloth spread across the living room floor. As Chloe reached for another sheet of paper, she pulled a brochure from beneath the pile. Its glossy cover caught Emily's eye. The image showed a row of shops nestled along Market Street, the familiar curve of the sidewalk leading to a highlighted building. Emily froze. Her breath tightened as she recognized the picture. It was the property her company had been considering for months, the one the investors insisted she acquire for the flagship location. She had stared at that brochure countless nights under the cold light of her office lamp. Chloe noticed her stillness and held up the brochure. "That is our building," she said cheerfully. "Daddy says people might buy it. He wants to stay, though, because Grandpa built the garage a long time ago." Emily's fingers tightened slightly around the paper. She studied the photograph more closely. The sign that read Brooks Auto and Repair hung above the entrance, tilted slightly to one side, but full of character. The red brick walls looked weathered yet strong, standing like a piece of Madison's history. Her heart sank as understanding washed over her. "This garage," she whispered softly, almost to herself. "This is the Market Street property." Chloe nodded, unaware of the conflict forming in Emily's chest. "Daddy does not want to move," she said with the openness only a child could carry. He says Mommy loved this place. She said it made him proud. Chloe's voice dropped to a quiet tone. Sometimes he sits downstairs at night and holds the toolbox that belonged to Grandpa. I think it helps him feel close to Mommy. Her words entered Emily like a cold wind through a crack in the window. She swallowed hard, the room briefly swaying as she tried to make sense of it. The garage was more than a business. It was a family legacy, a memory held together by years of devotion and grief. She pictured Daniel's gentle smile the night before, the way he spoke of responsibility and kindness. She thought of Chloe's joyful spirit, shaped by the love of a father who had carried sorrow with quiet strength. Emily's voice faltered. Do you know why someone wants to buy it? Chloe shrugged, her curls bouncing softly. Daddy says a big company might want the land. He told Aunt Rachel that he hopes it will not force us to leave. Then, almost in a whisper, she added, Daddy says he will keep the garage running for Mommy. It was her dream, too. Those words struck Emily with the force of a truth she had not wanted to face. She felt the weight of every document she had signed, every meeting she had endured, every hope tied to the survival of her company. The realization that her own plans threatened the heart of the little home she stood in filled her with a sudden, aching sorrow. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, startling her from the moment. She pulled it out, seeing a message from Stephen Reed asking for a final answer on the Market Street property. Each word on the screen felt heavy, as if carved from iron. Emily stood slowly, her hands trembling. Chloe looked up at her with wide eyes, sensing something had shifted. The room that had felt so warm moments ago now seemed clouded by the weight of an impossible choice. Emily loved her company, yet here in this small apartment decorated with handmade paper snowflakes, she saw the life of a man who had carried loss with dignity and the innocent joy of a child who simply wanted her father to smile again. As the sound of Daniel's footsteps echoed up the stairwell, Emily held the brochure against her chest. She knew nothing about the decision ahead would be simple, but she also knew her heart had already begun to change. Daniel entered the apartment with a gentle smile, unaware of the storm gathering behind Emily's eyes. Chloe ran to him, eager to show the small gown she and Emily had draped from a piece of soft cotton. He praised the design with warmth in his voice, and Chloe laughed as she spun around with pride. The tender scene pierced Emily's heart like a quiet, painful truth. She saw a father doing all he could to keep joy alive for his daughter, protecting the last pieces of a life built with love and loss. Emily forced a smile, but her breath came shallow. She murmured something about needing to return to her office, though afternoon light still filtered through the window. Daniel offered to walk her down, but she politely declined, saying she only needed a moment of fresh air. She thanked him for the day, for the hospitality, for the gentle kindness she had rarely felt in recent years. Her voice wavered, but she hoped neither father nor daughter noticed. Chloe waved, happy and trusting, unaware of the turmoil filling Emily's chest. When Emily stepped into the stairwell, the door closed behind her with a soft click, and the narrow hallway filled with the echo of her quickening breath. She held the railing tightly as she descended, her heart pounding as though it carried the weight of two worlds. The cold air hit her face as she stepped outside, but even the winter wind could not steady the confusion inside her. She reached her car, slid into the driver's seat, and gripped the steering wheel with trembling hands. The brochure lay on the passenger seat, staring back at her like an unresolved truth. She closed her eyes, trying to breathe, but all she could see was Chloe's bright smile and Daniel's gentle eyes. All she could hear were the words the little girl had spoken with innocent trust: Daddy wants to keep the garage because Mommy loved it. Her phone vibrated again. Another message from Stephen. Emily, the board needs the decision now. The Market Street property is our only chance. Her pulse quickened. She felt caught between duty and compassion, between a dream built over years and a family held together by resilience. She imagined the sound of demolition machines tearing through the brick walls of Brooks Auto and Repair. She pictured Daniel standing in the empty lot, holding the old toolbox of his father, wondering how a promise he had tried so hard to keep slipped away. Tears gathered, but she blinked them back, unwilling to let them fall. She did not know how to explain this conflict to anyone. To choose the garage meant risking the future of her company and the hopes of hundreds of employees. Yet to choose the company meant destroying the place where Daniel's memories lived, where Chloe's childhood bloomed in drawings and laughter. She picked up her phone with a shaking hand and called Stephen. The familiar voice answered quickly, asking for the final word. Emily hesitated, feeling her throat constrict. She looked once more at the brochure, then out toward the garage windows glowing softly beneath the winter sky. The weight of the moment settled on her shoulders like frozen stone. "We cannot buy it," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Silence filled the car, heavy as snowfall. Stephen asked why, confusion mingled with frustration. Emily could not tell him the entire truth. She simply said that the building's current owner could not lose it. She said, destroying the garage would be wrong. She spoke with a trembling conviction that surprised even herself. Stephen's tone hardened, reminding her of the consequences. He warned that the company might not survive without the new location. She listened, knowing every word was true, yet unable to take back her decision. When she ended the call, the silence around her felt almost deafening. Emily leaned forward, resting her forehead against the steering wheel. A long breath escaped her, carrying both grief and relief. She did not know what the future would bring. She only knew she could not sacrifice the home of a man who had opened his heart with such quiet sincerity. The engine remained still as she sat there watching snow begin to fall again. Each flake drifted gently against the windshield, mirroring the slow unraveling of everything she thought she needed to hold together. In that fragile quiet, Emily finally understood that some choices broke pieces of the heart, no matter which path one chose. The next 3 days passed in a haze of heavy silence. Emily moved through her apartment like a shadow, answering only the messages that could not be ignored and burying herself beneath piles of unfinished work. She kept her phone close, yet she never found the courage to open the messages waiting on the screen. Each one carried Daniel's gentle words, asking if she was all right, wondering if she needed anything, hoping to see her again. The unread notifications filled her with guilt so deep she could barely take a steady breath. She would pick up her phone, stare at his name, and feel her heart tighten. She wanted to reply, wanted to explain, wanted to tell him how the truth had shaken her. Yet every time she tried to type a single word, the fear of hurting him even more stopped her. Her days blurred together, filled with restless thoughts and constant questions that offered no peace. Meanwhile, Daniel carried a growing worry beneath the calm smile he kept for Chloe. He answered her bright questions with soft patience, but every night after she fell asleep, he found himself sitting in the dim light of the garage, holding his father's old wrench and wondering what had gone wrong. He replayed each memory of their time together, searching for signs he had missed. His messages became quieter, shorter, shaped by hope and restrained by doubt. When the 4th morning arrived, Emily sat at her desk surrounded by papers she could barely read. The winter light outside looked pale and distant, stretching across the frozen lake, like a reminder of how easily warmth slipped away. She rubbed her tired eyes, feeling as though her heart had closed itself in a room she no longer knew how to enter. A soft knock startled her. Before she could answer, the door opened, and her receptionist stepped in with a troubled expression. She said someone was here asking to see Emily, someone who would not leave without speaking to her. Emily stood unsure of who it could be. The moment she stepped into the waiting area, she saw Rachel Brooks sitting with her coat still dusted in snow. The strength in the woman's posture contrasted with the sadness in her eyes. Emily's breath caught as their gazes met. Rachel rose slowly and approached her with a quiet resolve. "I am not here to argue," she said with calm sincerity. "I am here because someone very small is hurting and does not understand why you disappeared." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. It was bright red and decorated with childlike swirls of gold crayon. She placed it in Emily's hands without another word. When Emily unfolded it, her vision blurred at once. The drawing showed 3 figures beneath a simple Christmas tree. The smallest figure held hands with the 2 taller ones. Above each figure, written in careful, wobbly letters, were the words, "Daddy, me and Emily." Snowflakes floated around them, and a star sat atop the tree. At the bottom of the page in Chloe's uneven handwriting were the words, "My Christmas wish is that she stays." Emily pressed the paper to her chest as though trying to hold together the pieces of her heart. Rachel spoke again, gently but firmly. "I do not know what happened, Emily, but my brother has not smiled since you left. And Chloe keeps asking if she did something wrong. That child believes you brought something warm back into their home. Please at least think about what this means." Her words settled like soft snow, touching places Emily had tried to protect with distance. She felt the edges of her resolve beginning to melt. Rachel did not linger. She simply gave a respectful nod and walked toward the door. As she stepped into the hallway, she turned once more and said, "Emily, my brother is a good man with a fragile heart. He has carried grief for a long time. He finally had hope again. Do not let fear steal that from him." When the door closed, Emily stood alone with Chloe's drawing trembling in her hands. Tears slipped down her cheeks, quiet as the snowfall outside. The drawing felt like a small lantern glowing in the darkness, urging her to find her way back to something pure and honest. And for the first time since she walked away, she felt the faint stirrings of courage returning. The hours after Rachel left drifted by like slow-moving shadows. Emily sat at her desk with Chloe's drawing spread before her, the soft colors pulling at every corner of her heart. She traced the outline of the three figures with her fingertip, feeling the tenderness behind each stroke. It was not simply a child's wish. It was a gentle plea from a little girl who yearned for warmth and for a future where her father smiled without hiding any part of himself. Emily leaned back and let out a long breath. The truth she had been avoiding now pressed forward with quiet insistence. She could not destroy the garage. She could not take away the one place that held Daniel's memories, his father's legacy, and Chloe's sense of home. Yet she also could not abandon the people who depended on her. The thought of letting her employees down weighed heavily against her ribs. She closed her eyes, searching for a path that did not force her to choose between two fragile worlds. A moment later, an idea stirred in the quiet of her mind. At first it seemed impossible, but as she shaped it piece by piece, it began to form into something real. She reached for her planner and sketched out a rough outline, bringing together two spaces that had always been seen as separate. A building that grew upward instead of outward. A place that respected history while welcoming new dreams. She called Stephen immediately. He answered with cautious irritation, bracing himself for another refusal. But as she explained her idea step by careful step, his tone softened. She described keeping the garage on the ground floor, preserving its integrity while constructing her fashion store above it. She spoke about blending two worlds into one structure, giving both enterprises a place under the same roof. She mentioned how customers visiting her store could rely on the trusted services of the garage below, creating a community-centered space that honored tradition while embracing new possibilities. Stephen was silent for a long moment. She held her breath, waiting. Then he admitted softly that the plan had more promise than anything they had considered. He asked for time to run the numbers and present the idea to the board. When they ended the call, Emily felt hope rise within her like a small flame, growing stronger with each passing second. She knew what she needed to do next. That evening, Emily made her way to Maple Street Café. The snow had thickened once more, settling in soft waves along the sidewalk. The warm glow from the caf windows cast a welcoming light across the street. As she stepped inside, the familiar scent of roasted coffee beans washed over her. Her heart quickened when she spotted Daniel seated at a corner table with Chloe beside him, a small cup of cocoa in her hands. Chloe looked up first, her face brightening as she leaped from her chair. She ran to Emily and wrapped her arms around her waist in an embrace filled with relief. "I knew you would come back," she said with childish certainty. Daniel rose slowly, his expression guarded yet touched with something tender beneath the surface. Emily swallowed, feeling the weight of the days she had let slip away. "May we talk?" she asked softly. Daniel guided Chloe to Judith's counter, where she happily chatted with the owner. He then returned to the booth, waiting with a quiet patience that made Emily's heart ache. She sat across from him and placed a folder on the table, though her eyes stayed on his face. "I am sorry," she began, her voice trembling with sincerity. "I disappeared because I did not know how to face the truth. My company wanted to buy this building. Your building. They wanted to tear it down. And I did not realize it until I was standing in your home with Chloe's drawings at my feet." Daniel's expression tightened in hurt, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "I could not destroy the place that holds your memories," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I could not take away Chloe's home. And I could not pretend the decision did not matter." She pushed the folder gently toward him. Inside were sketches, written proposals, and the first outlines of a shared vision. "This is a plan to build around the garage. Your shop stays just as it is. My store rises above it. We become partners, sharing the space and helping each other grow. No one loses anything. Everyone gains something." Daniel opened the folder with cautious hands. His eyes moved slowly across the pages, widening with surprise and something warmer than gratitude. When he looked up again, his voice carried disbelief, touched with hope. "You would do this?" he asked softly. "For us?" Emily reached out, resting her palm near his. "Not for the company. And not only for you. For all of us. For the people who deserve a future, built with care, not sacrifice." Daniel's eyes softened as the weight he had carried for years loosened just a little. A quiet peace settled between them, shaped by truth and courage. Outside, the snow continued to fall, gentle and patient, as though blessing the fragile new beginning forming within the small calf. A full year passed, unfolding with quiet determination, patient work, and the slow blossoming of something gentle between Emily, Daniel, and little Chloe. Winter came again, brushing Madison with soft snow and bringing with it the scent of pine drifting along State Street. The new building stood proudly at the corner of Market Street, its windows glowing warmly against the evening sky. Brooks Auto and Repair remained just as it had always been, firmly rooted on the ground floor. Above it rose the elegant space of Emily's flagship store, its tall windows framing displays designed with care and gratitude. People paused often to admire the harmony between the two floors, as though sensing the way history and hope had been woven together without overpowering each other. Inside the garage, Daniel continued his work with the same steady dedication he had inherited from his father. On the upper level, Emily guided her team with renewed strength, her heart lighter than the year before. Their businesses, once separate worlds, now supported each other like two branches of the same tree. As Christmas night arrived, the three of them walked through the falling snow toward Maple Street Café, returning to the place where their paths had first crossed with such quiet magic. Chloe danced ahead, leaving tiny footprints in the fresh snow while humming a soft tune. Her joy brightened the evening like a small lantern guiding them forward. When they stepped inside the cafe, the familiar warmth wrapped around them. Judith greeted them with a heartfelt smile, her eyes reflecting the gentle pride she felt for this small family that had grown beneath her watchful care. She guided them to the same booth where Emily and Daniel had shared their first quiet conversation. The candle flickered once more in the center of the table, just as it had a year earlier. Chloe climbed into the corner seat, her eyes sparkling as she looked between the two adults who had become the steady center of her world. She pressed her hands together excitedly and whispered, "This is the place where everything started." Emily reached across the table to squeeze her hand gently, feeling a warm tenderness rise inside her. Daniel watched them both with a calm joy that had taken root slowly over the year. His heart felt lighter, no longer held down by the weight of grief alone. Time had allowed him to honor the memories of the past while embracing the gentle promise of the future. He reached into his coat pocket, feeling the small box held carefully there. The moment felt right, surrounded by the glow of the calf lights and the quiet hush of falling snow outside. Judith brought over a small dessert topped with a single candle. "For my favorite family," she said softly. Chloe giggled and clapped her hands, making the candlelight dance across her bright eyes. Daniel took a quiet breath, then stood from the booth, his hands trembling slightly with both courage and hope. Emily looked up, sensing the shift in the air. Her heart fluttered as Daniel stepped beside her, his expression filled with a tenderness she had only seen in rare, cherished moments. He opened the small box, revealing a simple ring that held more meaning than any elaborate design ever could. "Emily Harmon," he began, his voice steady yet touched with emotion. "You saved my garage. You gave my daughter your kindness. And you brought warmth back into a home that had forgotten how to breathe. You have stood beside us through every season, offering hope when we needed it most. Will you walk with us for every Christmas that follows this one? Will you marry us?" Before he even finished speaking, Emily felt tears rise soft as the snow drifting past the caf windows. She nodded with such certainty that her voice caught for a moment before she found it again. "Yes, Daniel. Yes, with all my heart." Chloe threw her arms around both of them, her laughter brightening the night as if 100 tiny bells rang together. "Now I get a mommy for every Christmas forever," she declared with such joy that the entire caf smiled with her. Warm applause rose gently from nearby tables as friends and strangers alike shared in the happiness of the moment. Judith wiped her eyes discreetly before saying that some stories were meant to unfold like blessings carried on winter winds. 6 months later, they held a small wedding celebration right here, in the same caf, filling the space with family friends and the quiet glow of hope fulfilled. Chloe served as the flower girl in a dress she had designed, with Emily carrying petals she sprinkled with pride. When Emily and Daniel shared their first dance beneath the soft glow of the caf lights, the world outside seemed to pause in reverence. On that night, as snow drifted past the windows, once more, Emily rested her head on Daniel's shoulder and whispered that even the worst nights could lead to the best beginnings. Daniel smiled, agreeing softly as Chloe snapped countless pictures with a disposable camera she carried like a treasure. The world felt generous again. It felt patient and full of meaning. And as their family stood together beneath the quiet glow of Christmas lights, they understood that love often arrives in the moments when one least expects it, quietly stitching lives together in gentle and enduring ways. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that hope can find its way even in the coldest seasons, please share your thoughts below. And if you wish to hear more warm tales of courage and connection, remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for spending this evening with us, and may your own path be blessed with the gentle light of love.